back once more. I am Joe Darlington, and this is Being James Bond, and with me, as always...
I'm still David Zaritsky from the Bond Experience.
He still is. He still is, and we are still here, and we are still talking about our sophomore Bond films and testing a little theory. Are the sophomore films... Do they hit a little bit of a sophomore slump? That's what we're talking about. So...
It's going to be interesting, this one.
It is, yeah.
I don't know if you saw the last video, but when we were done with The Man with the Golden Gun, I confessed something to Joe that maybe he forgot. And that is that this film right here that you see behind us, Tomorrow Never Dies, made it into my top 5. And I want to start off by explaining why.
Okay.
First of all, and this is a mea culpa, being very transparent, very emotional, very behavioral science. But this film came at a time when I was just starting to get into the Bond lifestyle. I was a young executive, 1997, saw this film, and it changed the way I saw my hobby, my clothing, my style, fitness, like everything. Pierce Brosnan to me, like, couldn't do any wrong. And it was this movie that just kind of lifted me, okay? So I'm screwed right away. Second of all, I just have so much fun with this movie because Bond is having fun in this movie.
Yeah.
Bond is kind of like the Connery Bond where, you know, he's pithy, he's a bit obnoxious, he's swarmy, he's all the things that I love Brosnan's Bond to be. They've got absolutely, as I break things, amazing gadgets, which are just so much fun. It just, to me, it hits on so many different levels, but I know we're going to get into the details. So what do you think of the movie overall?
Well, first of all, let me tell you that I agree with everything you just said. And when I mean agree, I mean I kind of remember getting the same bug around this time as well. Because, I mean, honestly, again, we're talking about... we're Bond fans when we were younger. The last James Bond film before Brosnan, I was 19 years old when that came out. I mean, that's how long ago it was. Then there was this long gap, and then GoldenEye comes out when I'm 25, and now it's kind of a game changer because, like, now I'm kind of becoming an adult. So, yeah, when Tomorrow Never Dies came out, I was kind of getting much more deeper into being a Bond fan. Like, this was when, like, as soon as the first one comes out, opening night, I'm there, you know, and this was kind of the trend back then. So I can totally hear what you're saying. I mean, this kind of got us at the right time. Brosnan is great as James Bond. I mean, this is around the time where every time you went to buy a suit for a job interview, you popped in a James Bond movie. And you tried to match exactly what he was wearing. I think I discovered pocket squares right around GoldenEye. So I absolutely positively get that. However, I will say that the film, it's not a bad film. But I will argue that this is probably a prime example of where exactly what I'm talking about kicks in, where we had the first one was a bang zoom, everyone loved it. Now what do we do?
Right.
And again, they are trying to, they're kind of in that mode where, well, what worked about the last one? What didn't work about the last one? Let's do a couple course corrections. They bring in David Arnold to fix the lack of a good score in GoldenEye. So we're firing on all cylinders in that respect, but we're also kind of struggling to figure out, well, where does Bond exist in the world today? I find it with the villain. It's like, well, who would Bond be battling today? Right. Well, he'd be battling, you know, a big corporate media bigwig, and which frankly is almost more relevant today than it was back then.
Yes.
So I'm not knocking it, but again, it is kind of it's getting more real world than Bondish. You know what I mean? I mean this to me is not an over the top villain. It's a real life villain. Even his gadgets, the one you just pulled out. Interestingly, I look at that and I say, it was his cell phone. That was his gadget. And it's kind of like, well, geez, today, how come Bond just doesn't have his gadget as apps on his phone? Like, I mean, it was almost like, what would a modern Bond gadget be? And I kind of feel like the phone is good, but it's kind of, as far as Bond gadgets goes, it's almost a little too realistic, maybe even.
Well, Bond's always had watches and things
Sure.
like that. He has a watch
Yeah.
in this movie, he had
Yes.
a watch in GoldenEye. So they've always been sort of hidden. Even
Yeah.
the breather was in a cigar
Yes.
tube. I mean,
No, absolutely, yeah.
it's always been, a
Hiding in plain
facade of
sight.
something.
Yeah.
Perfectly said.
Yeah.
He's the writer. I get what you're saying, and I can't really be argumentative, and this is just going to confuse people even more. But I've said from time to time, by the way, GoldenEye right over here, I even though GoldenEye did not make my top five, and Tomorrow Never Dies did. I feel GoldenEye is a better movie. I think it has better bad guys, multiple better bad guys. I think the story, the intrigue, the plot, the premise, the wholeness of it from a storyline that takes you through the different arcs is better. I think the seriousness of Brosnan is excellent in GoldenEye. However, the child in me, there's a great quote that Brosnan has in Tomorrow Never Dies, and he goes, it comes from never growing up.
Yeah.
You were pretty good with that hook.
It comes from growing up in a rough neighborhood. You were pretty good on the bike.
Well, that comes from not growing up at all.
But the reality is that that's why I love Tomorrow Never Dies. And in some ways, I feel like Tomorrow Never Dies was the franchise owner's answer to saying, we got you in GoldenEye, you buy the Bond, now we're going to make some improvements. You call them tweaks, improvements. We're going to make it fun again. We're going to have him doing a car. We're going to have a motorcycle because we had a really kind of laborious tank chase. We're going to have a much better score, which is, you can't argue with that.
Not at all.
God, beat
Not
up
at all.
David Arnold. Let's see the comments you get.
Believe me.
Come with
I'm with you
pitchforks
there.
to your house. So I feel like this is their way of saying we're going to have fun again, which, by the way, we just talked about The Man with the Golden Gun. I think they tried to tweak that, and they were unsuccessful. I think with Tomorrow Never Dies, it worked. The fun factor went up.
Yes, right. Again, I can't argue with that. I do feel that they're working very hard to give you a fun movie. There's a lot in here. Whereas when we talked about The Man with the Golden Gun, I kind of called it was just enough.
Yeah.
It was good enough. I don't think they're resting on their laurels in this one. I do think that they're working very hard to deliver. But what I will say is that it does kind of suffer from that. But where do we fit in the bigger scheme of things? How does this Bond fit into world events, et cetera, et cetera? And I think those kind of growing pains are visible. Where and again, another factor that we kind of briefly mentioned is the editing. Like when Scott and I did our review, one of the things that he was adamant about was that he hated how it was edited, cut. It was this kind of early, not the shaky cam, super fast cuts that we get today.
Right.
But it was kind of the early stages of that where there's the briefing in the car. The camera is just all over the place. The camera is sometimes they're talking, they cut to outside the car, the bikes alongside, they cut out to Moneypenny sitting in the front seat of the car. And it's kind of frantic for no real reason at a moment where you want to be sitting there kind of absorbing and understanding the story. This used to be something that would happen in M's office. They would go into M's office. It was a very,
Right.
Here's the plot, right? In M's office, the big, beautiful room, et cetera, et cetera. Here, it's like they're kind of saying to themselves, no, we can't do that. We have to go a little more bombastic. The kids want it fast and furious, so we have to deliver. And again, I get that. I get it, and I think that the overall, the sum of its parts, still a pretty solid film. I think the action scenes are solid. I think the backseat car thing is good. So again, it's not a bad movie, but I absolutely believe that it does suffer from that, like, well, what now? And we haven't really gotten our groove yet. And I think, and even the style from GoldenEye to Tomorrow Never Dies, there's a big jump in style too, where GoldenEye looks almost kind of timeless, where you have elements. I mean, there's a tank chase. The bad guy is in a train. I mean, who would have their headquarters in a train?
Right.
But it was almost this kind of like trapped in time. Like when you watch it, it's hard to pinpoint when this happens. Tomorrow Never Dies, all of a sudden now the party has laser lights and stuff. Like it's very like they're trying to sort of say this is happening in modern times. This is a modern Bond film.
Yeah.
So again, it's not that the film is bad. Just that I think the growing pains are visible.
I agree with 75% of what you're saying.
I'll take it.
I love the edits that you referred to, outside, inside the car. I love the fact that I heard you and Scott talk about this. It drives you guys nuts that they were drinking in the car. I love that because it's crazy.
Right.
It's insane. I mean, who's doing that? I want to do that.
Yeah.
Well, no, I won't drive. But the reality is that I found that you're right in the sense that GoldenEye does not look like 1995.
Right.
Tomorrow Never Dies looks like 1997.
Yeah.
And by the way, because I'm a style guy, like the style, his hair, the film stock, even the way it looks like a 1997.
Yeah.
Came out the same year as Titanic, all that kind of film stock. It's very rich looking. It's not that it's bad, but for some reason, GoldenEye seems to have this it's not a filter, but it's this sheen that's almost like it could be From Russia with Love. It could be the year after. And it's got this timeless aspect to it, which I would 100% agree.
Right.
I find that with Tomorrow Never Dies, the reason why it meets my approval and then some is because sometimes I'm not in the mood for a Casino Royale or From Russia with Love or any one of them a little bit more serious films.
Yeah.
And sometimes I just want to have fun. Guys just want to have fun. That's not how the song goes.
Yeah.
But I will tell you this. I think the franchise owners were more Joe Darlington than David Zaritsky because I would say, and we like to bookend, The World Is Not Enough, which came right after this, I think it was a little bit more back to the GoldenEye Bond. And I don't mean Bond movie. I mean Brosnan's Bond in The World Is Not Enough matches GoldenEye Bond. If it was GoldenEye and then The World Is Not Enough, I'd be like, oh, just logical. He's a little bit older, a little grayer.
Right.
The Tomorrow Never Dies Bond is a little bit more like the Connery quippy Bond.
Yes.
Do you agree?
100%. And I think when you bring up The World Is Not Enough, and again, I wouldn't even call The World Is Not Enough, sorry, Lorenzo, I wouldn't call it the best Bond film in the world, but it is a good one. I find it's a good, solid film. But when you sort of look at the first three of the Brosnans and you kind of go, okay, well, now where does Tomorrow Never Dies fit into this? Suddenly, again, he's a little shorter next to his classmates that are a little taller. And it's interesting, too, because when you bring up The World Is Not Enough, you saw that ferociousness of Brosnan again. That kind of goes back to my argument where, again, I don't know if they knew where they wanted this character to go. Once they hit their third one, now you sort of see how Brosnan wants to play this. Yeah. In Tomorrow Never Dies, there's a lot of self-effacing bits of humor. The Bond is the butt of the joke a lot of times. He goes over to type the messages, but the keyboard is in Chinese.
They take the Mickey out
Whoops!
Of him.
Maybe you can do that. Then he leans over on the dragon, the fire. Hey, okay. So he's kind of the butt of the joke sometimes, which is sort of weird for Bond movies. But it kind of it lends to that idea. I don't know how we want this Bond to be just yet. So we're going to try different things. And one of the things I haven't even talked about yet is the action scenes, where when you get to the climax in the boat and Brosnan is running around with two guns blazing.
I'll give you that.
It's like, and that kind of goes to where my argument is like, shouldn't Bond move? It's an action movie, right? Don't we need guns everywhere, blazing and stuff? And it doesn't really work for James Bond.
That's indefensible because also that's when I don't like the editing. The whole slow-mo, not needed. Yeah. Plus, it is a little bit Rambo-esque. It's a great use of some of the gadgets. But then, to me, also, that part at the ending on the boat really shows how weak the bad guy is. The ha. Right. And by the way, Pierce is, listen to me, Jonathan... Price, Pierce, listen to me, is, I swear I wasn't knocked on the head before this film.
We haven't started drinking yet either.
We haven't, I know. Maybe I should start. But he's a great actor. Like, I've seen him in great films. Yeah. Here, it's almost like the director, which I blame a little bit on, is just like, okay, I want you to mac it up even more. Like, like overact, and then when you think you're overacting enough, dial it up to 11. And to me, as good as Michelle Yeoh is as a quote unquote Bond girl and ally. I think he's a really weak bad guy, which does hurt this, which makes it a clunky sophomore moment.
Right. Yes, and again, they're basing this character not so much on like a larger than life Bondish character, but they're kind of looking at real life people, the big head honchos in media with a splash of Hugh Hefner so I get what they're going for, but it's kind of like, okay, so we're trying to merge Bond with the real world as it is in the 90s,
right?
And right, the overall effect, it's almost like you're kind of, I want my vodka just vodka. I don't want a lot of ice and a lot of water in it. And I kind of feel like that's kind of what you're doing to Bond in this. By trying to make it a little too real world-ish, you're kind of watering down the overall effect. So you're getting villains that, like you said, are not these over-the-top Bond villains that we know, but kind of somewhere in the real world, somewhere over the top, etc.
It could be said that Tomorrow Never Dies is the Pickletini of martinis.
Wow.
It is because
I thought I was going to be hard on this movie.
No, pickletinis are fun.
Is that right?
I love pickletinis. You should see. I post them all the time. I think they're delicious.
This is true.
But if you're in the mood for a pickletini, if you're not, 9 times out of 10, you just want vodka in a cold glass.
Right. Yeah.
Jumping down your gullet.
There you go.
I get it.
That's probably a good way to sum it up.
All right. As much as I love this film, it probably does have a lot of trappings of the sophomore clunk that you were talking about. I will defend it to the end, to everybody watching and to him, but I do think, to your point, it does waver a bit in that regard.
Still a good movie, but right.
You heard it. What would you give it, by the way? Like a scale of 1 to 10?
Am I judging it against just films in general, or
yeah, all the Bond films kind of taken as a whole? Where would you put it?
I would say, well, against other Bond films, I would put it kind of right in the middle, like kind of squarely in the middle. I wouldn't call it a bad film, but again, not one of the more memorable outings either.
Especially compared to your bookends, which you really like.
Yeah, I mean, GoldenEye, I kind of agree with what you said earlier about, like, I think we've said in the past, on paper, it's a great film. It checks all the right boxes. On a gut level, I don't know if it really resonates with me as it does with a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people think this is far and away one of the best films easily. I like it. But I do think The World Is Not Enough is probably Brosnan's best outing. I think it's, again, still not perfect, but still probably the best of the Brosnans.
And we both universally agree that this is a far superior music score than
100%. 100%. It's a good exercise in showing just how important the score can be to a film.
Can you imagine if a fan out there took GoldenEye and put like a John Barry score to it or something?
I've actually seen it.
Oh, you have seen it?
Yeah.
Why have I not seen this?
I've seen somebody do a fan edit of it, and it's actually very good. In fact, I will make sure that you get it.
I didn't hear that. Joe, thank you again. This was fun.
Thank you. Thank you for being on Being James Bond, and I believe next time I will be joining you over at the Bond Experience.
Oh my gosh!
What?
For probably what Joe's going to call the epitome of sophomore outings. We don't want to give too much away in his opinion, but we're heading to Quantum of Solace, aren't we?
Absolutely, and I know this is a particular favorite of yours, so I know this is going to be. Is heated the right word? I think it's gonna get heated.
I'm going to need to take a moment. All right. Well, and this has been David Zaritsky from the Bond Experience.
And Joe Darlington from Being James Bond.
See you all real soon.
See you next time.
Oh, boy.